After a while, they want another one. And this is the reality of mankind. No matter how much we consume, no matter how much we buy, we'll always want more. And like I said, these are the things which are going to come back to bite us later on. For now, we had our parents come, and they were concerned with, a lot of our parents, the immigrants, they came, and they were concerned with making a living, making sure that the conditions that they came from, that their kids don't have to face this. So they spent their time, a lot of them, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of them spent their time making this money. Making sure that their kids get the education. But Islam had nothing to do with it. And they chose to leave out Islam. And now we have a generation which is caught up in this dunya. But now imagine us, our generation, if we're in this state of consumerism, and we're buying and buying and buying, and that's all we're concerned with. Our job or whatever we're doing, whatever career paths we pick to buy more and more and more. Now imagine what's going to happen when our generation grows up. We're not going to be any better. Matter of fact, we're going to be 10 times worse. Because we're more enticed by the dunya. The dunya is all around us, and no one can deny this. Living in the United States, when everything is marketed to us, no one can deny this. And then there's other things which come along with consumerism. There are other things that we are spoon-fed that keep us in this dumbed-down state. This state of not realizing what our true problems are and not realizing what the purpose of our life is. مَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I haven't created man nor jinn except but for the purpose to worship me. We are created for the purpose of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we show up on the Day of Judgment, we can say, yes, I worshipped you, and I was sincere in my worship, and I had true tawheed in my heart, so I may be granted paradise. One of these things no one can deny is music. Now these days, it's really hard to talk about music. Because there's so many voices speaking out for music. But I'm not going to stand here and quote to you all the adillah, all the proofs, and say this is why music is haram. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that the four madhahib, the Hanafis, the Shafi'is, the Malikis, the Hanbalis, they're in agreement that music is haram. That the majority of the scholars in our ummah are in agreement that music is haram. There's no difference of opinion. And when people say there's this great difference of opinion when it comes to music, that's not true. But that's not the point of this talk today. The point is that music is out there. But music is a fitna. This is one thing which we all need to understand and realize that yes, music is there and music is a fitna. People always tell us music haram, leave it alone, books closed. But the fact is, as somebody who's young, as somebody who lives in this society, day in and day out, you're faced with music. I don't care what you say, you're faced with music. You go to the mall, you're walking through the mall, and there's music. You walk into a store, depending on what type of store it is, if it's like urban clothing, then you'll hear like hip-hop and whatever. And if it's like an alternative store, alternative clothing, you'll hear punk rock and everything else. And if you're in a store that sells clothes for young girls, you'll hear pop songs or whatever it is. This is the reality. And then we begin to associate these feelings that we get while listening to this music with our clothes and with the whole persona that we're putting across. If you go to the grocery store, you'll hear music. Now, when somebody told me this, they said, every grocery store you go to, there's music. In the beginning, I was like, that's not true. I've never heard music in the grocery store. What are you talking about? And then I went to the grocery store the next time, and I was listening, and I heard music. I was like, subhanAllah. And then the next grocery store I went to, there was music. And then I went to another grocery store, there was music. Then I realized every grocery store has music. And the most cliche thing, elevator music. Now, why do they put music in the elevator? You're in there for 3 seconds. You're in there for a short period of time. You always hear about elevator music. There's always music in the elevator. You're in the car, you pull up to a stoplight, some dude pulls up, and he's blasting the newest record or whatever's on, and you hear it, and you recognize it. That's music for you. You can't hide. You're sitting, whether you listen to music or not, your boy's sitting next to you, he's listening to his iPod, blasting whatever's on there, and you know what's on there. It's the newest record for whatever and whatever. You'll recognize it, it's there. So music's there, and music's a fitna. But if we acknowledge this, which we do have to acknowledge, no one will deny that living in this society, music is a fitna. But if we acknowledge this, we have to acknowledge everything else that music brings along with it. And we have to acknowledge the reality of music. We have to acknowledge that music for us is a way out. That when we're having a bad day, or we're going through certain feelings, we want to escape, we listen to music. We're in a certain mood, or if we're not in a certain mood, to get in that mood, we listen to music. If we're feeling down, we listen to music. If we want to feel better about ourselves, if we want to feel better about our problems, if we want to feel more in tune with the rest of society, we listen to music. At the whole time, we're escaping the real purpose of our life and the real thing that's going to come back and haunt us. Right? When I used to listen to music, and alhamdulillah, I've managed to distance myself from listening to music. But when I used to listen to music, I used to be like, look, I don't listen to pop music. I don't listen to mainstream stuff. I listen to underground music. I listen to stuff where they're not telling me what to do, and they're not selling me stuff, you know? And there's this thing called conscious rap, where they talk about real problems. And I would try to justify this to me. Like, look, this music, it's not the mainstream music that's out there. This is conscious rap. You know, or you have a rock band which talks about real problems and people being oppressed, and you get fooled and you're like, you know, that's the stuff right there. That's the music I need to listen to. But in actuality, all this music is taking you away from what you're really here for. You're here to prepare for that day when you're standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're being questioned about your deeds. And at the end of this questioning, you have two paths. It's either heaven or it's hell. That is the true day that we all need to be preparing for. And this is the true reality of music. This is what it's doing. It's a numbing of the minds, a numbing of the masses. You know, you go to Muslim countries, for example, Turkey, a rock band will come there and they'll fill stadiums. You'll see packed. Bigger stadiums than you've seen here. And you wonder what's going on. Why is this such a big phenomenon? And why have the people who control things let this pass and let this spread everywhere? Because you keep the people away from their real problems. You keep the Muslims, for example, away from making kalimatullahi al-ulya, from making the word of Allah, the kalima of Allah, the highest, of spreading the message of Tawheed, of fulfilling the real purpose of your life. If anything else, music is a controller of the hearts. And you know, I was one of those people who fought music till the last, till the end. And I was like, you know, music's not haram. You can do a lot of good through music and such and such and such. Right? But one day, for one of my art classes, we had to go listen to this guy who was playing the violin to another guy painting. It was like some artsy thing. You know, and I'm sitting there, and I don't like the violin in particular. I was more into like whatever else, and we'll leave that out. But, you know, I don't really like the violin. I have no desire to listen to the violin, but I sat there and I listened, and it really moved me. I'm not gonna lie. This music, it really moved me. When you listen to the violin and when you listen to what's really done, it really moves you. And it caused a great fear in my heart. And I'm like, I don't even like the violin. Why am I listening? Why am I enjoying this? And then you think of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said people will try to make stringed instruments halal close to the Day of Judgment. And then you realize that these are the things which really control you. I mean, if you think about all the instruments, you have the violin, you have the guitar, whatever other string instruments you have, they're very powerful. I've seen people do things with the guitar that are unimaginable. You know, and this is the reality of music. But the fact of the matter is, we accept it. We accept that this is a fitna. We accept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us by keeping us in this society and having to deal with this. But we also understand that in the end of the day, a Muslim is not a follower. We're not a follower of anything but Allah and His Messenger. Because this is the true guidance. And this is the only thing that's going to save us on the Day of Judgment. You know, they always talk about, if you take sociology classes or psychology classes, they talk about the big oops. You know, it's when a guy, you know, he lives his whole life, he has a dream, becomes a doctor, makes lots of money, gets his Benz or whatever he's doing, right? And he's there, and then he has a midlife crisis. And he's like, what am I doing in my life? What is all this worth? You know, or there's the guy, the big oops, when you're close to death, and you're like, wow, my whole life is gone. What did I do? What was all this worth?